It's Easter Sunday, 2025. Wow. It's such an important and inspiring and life-saving message. It's beyond and above my comprehension, really. It's changed the face of humanity. Christ, over 2,000 years ago, died on the cross to solidify a message of forgiveness and love and unity and salvation, trying to tell the world, to change their ways, to love one another. A lot of what was happening and still happening today, but happening during the time of Christ, was a lot of division amongst philosophies, a lot of persecution of people because they weren't of the same religion or economic class or political views. It still happens today. But the message of Christ is still here today, still trying to teach us that we're all just God's children, right? That's the message, is that you, me, and everybody are equal in that regard. We're just God's children. We're just here to serve some period of time on this earth for, philosophically speaking, reasons that everybody tries to kind of comprehend for themselves. There's lots of philosophies around that and what it might be and why. It ties into just about every aspect of life. Some people think that you separate that idea from science, but most of observations show that it's connected to everything that we kind of discuss, both in philosophy and in culture, in our social surroundings, and in science. It's not really something that we separate one from the other. And Christ was really here to humble everybody and say that that we don't worship man, or that we shouldn't worship man, that we worship the higher power, and the higher power sees us all as his, her creation. We use the word he a lot in the Bible, but that's really not really how it's meant to be specifically related to a male or a female God. That's not really. That was more of an analogy or whatever. The Father, but in a spiritual way, not necessarily in a physical way. So, but and it might help, especially as you're trying to understand life or whatever, that might get in the way of your growth spiritually, is to kind of get caught up in those things. And it's kind of something that you need to work on for yourself, as your relationship with God. And you don't necessarily need to use some specific description that's in language to define all of that. That's a much bigger concept. That's not the types of things you want to get hung up on. But what you want to focus on with this, specifically with relationship to this very important day of Easter, is the salvation. Salvation. A lot of times people get their egos get in the way of this idea of salvation. They think, well, who saves me? How does something save me? How does Christ save me? How does the ideas of Christ save me? How does the teachings of Christ save me? I can only save myself. Nobody can save me. But it's kind of interesting that Christ was really kind of telling you can save yourself, but you have to save but to save yourself, do it through the message of Christ. He wasn't trying to be, Christ wasn't a narcissistic person, and he wasn't, or God, or the Son of Man and the Son of God, you know. Christ is called the Son of Man because he was of a physical body, but the Holy Spirit was within him, and that was what we all can represents us all as the children of God. We're all the sons and daughters of God, and that's what it's meant by the Son of Man and the Son of God. He's both, and you are too. And every creation is part of God's creation. It's all part of God, and we're all part of the oneness. And so the set and the individual. So you're both. You're both part of the whole, and you're both yourself as an individual. And the salvation comes from the idea that we, as humans, we commit sin. That's part of being human for some reason. I have my own ideas of how to explain that. I think that the consciousness of our actions allows us to define things as sin. The harming of ourselves and the harming of others. Ultimately, when we sin, even if it's against somebody else, it's ultimately hurting our own individual self, spiritually, mentally, physically, socially, or all of the above. Those things are all tied together. And Christ was saying that you're human, you sin, and there's a path to improving. And forgiveness comes from both a sort of a purging of our consciousness, of our guilt, but it's also in an effort to improve, both as an individual, but also as a community, or as the church. The church is not a building, although we use that term interchangeably, but the church is all the believers, you know, of Christ. But what's unique about Christianity is that doesn't make you superior to non-Christians, other religions and other beliefs, which is part of the Old Testament that Christ was teaching that had, you know, these flaws, was that there was some superiority of one group to the other. Really more so with Christianity is that the belief in Christ makes you part of the Christian church, the group of people who are trying to follow the teachings of Christ, and the salvation that comes through that. And that's a big, big distinction. It doesn't make you better as to other people, but it makes you better as the role that you are playing here as a living human being, and whatever may come after. So Christ died for that. But not only did Christ die for that, he had to die for that. It was all part of the plan, that in order to, maybe in just the real simple terms, demarcation, mark the point in humanity where this message was going to be kind of written in stone, so to speak, in a metaphorical sense. You know, that this is going to be a day that's remembered, and this message is going to stay with humans. And the martyrism of Christ was essential for that. Without that martyrism, the message wouldn't last. It wouldn't be imprinted upon man and mankind. Although there were many other people who were also, and through history, have tried to also teach this message, you know, and some of them were martyrs too. But it was specifically with Christ and the tying together of the Son being the Son of God that changed everything, that marked the point of this path towards what we call salvation. Don't get too hung up on that. A lot of people really get hung up on that word salvation, and it just causes a lot of problems for people. Again, we have to put things in words, and this is concepts. Spirituality are much bigger than words. The salvation is the lifting, is the path to lifting a lot of the burdens of guilt and sin off of us so that we become better. And this gets into everything, you know, treating your body well, treating, you know, other people well, working on your mental health, and understanding the world around you, and understanding how small we are as individuals. Humbleness. This is the concept of humbleness, that no matter what we think we know about everything, we were just a small little. The fact that we can have a relationship with a God or with the Creator, however you want to say it, being such a humble and small part of the universe. We're a speck of dust, if that, in the universe. But yet, God gives us, and with the message of Christ, the opportunity to have a relationship with the Creator, and what comes after it. It's a phenomenal thing. So that humility is to always understand we don't know much, and try not to take shortcuts when you struggle with these things. You know, we're all struggling. We all have issues and problems, and sometimes oftentimes we turn to some sort of distraction. It can be a substance that we put into our body. A doctor can tell us to do something, or some friend on the street some so-called friend can tell us that we need to do this, or something to distract us, you know, doing bad things to ourselves. But really, we need to focus on strengthening ourselves in all ways, from a health standpoint, a mental standpoint, but also understanding that people who have issues and problems, there's real reasons behind that, and society has to make a judgment, you know, as to how we can handle those kinds of problematic things in our society. Sometimes we have to put people in jail and things like that, and that doesn't mean, though, that, so, you know, you have to learn how to draw the line between safety, but also in forgiveness and understanding people and where they come from. It's a delicate balance, right? I mean, sometimes the hatred overpowers more of the ideas of Christ when something bad happens, or somebody does something wrong to us, or, in other words, there's justification for things, and there's the idea of a system of justice, but that doesn't have to always come in association with some hatred. You know, we can deal with issues, we can understand that there's differences, but we can also do our best to avoid it going to war, or you know, things like that. You know, and that's where the forgiveness comes in. Again, you know, somebody could do something bad, and you could end up, you know, needing to put that person in jail, for example, because there's no better idea for how to handle it. But you can still have forgiveness for that person. You know, you can have both. You don't have to just you can understand other people who seem to be doing wrong to other people. Something in society, something in their life, maybe even something that's like a physical problem, you know, damage to the brain or something like that. you know, there's, because we're all one, there are explanations. Explanations don't mean that you can just let everything slide, but you can do it in a way without having just lack of understanding. We grow from understanding. Forgiveness helps us to understand, or helps us to somebody to try and find a solution to a problem that will be better than the way that the problem is dealt with now. So that's how we advance. If people just don't try to forgive, then we start to lack understanding, and we both individually stymie our growth, but also as a society, we stymie the growth of the society and as of humanity. So there's a growth process in all of this, and forgiveness is a key aspect to that growth process, both for ourselves personally and individually, but also as a community and as the world as a whole. So if you can't forgive, it's very hard to then think clearly about things. It's very hard to improve or to find new information, and because you're just hung up, you put up a wall. That does not mean that you have to tolerate bad things in your environment, though. You can change your environment. That doesn't have anything to do. Being forgiving doesn't mean you also have to be tolerant of a negative environment if it's hurting you. If you need to change your environment to a better environment, meaning where you live or who you're around, who your friends are, even family. I mean, you still have family, but that doesn't mean you have to, you're obligated. That's crazy, that you have to be obligated to tolerating something, even if it's family that hurts you. That's not necessary. You can have concern and love for your family members and your friends without also having to be committed to being influenced by them. You can live your own life. It's better, actually. It's actually better if most of the healing and the best that you can do for other people is when you develop independence in who you are. Do that as early as possible. In fact, people talk about these kinds of things have some sort of distant thing that happens in a person's life, but actually you start to build your relationship with God and with Christ at a young age. And Christ, he lived to about 33 years old is what they think. By the time he was a teenager, he was already on his journey to become Christ. He was learning and becoming who he was by the time he was a teenager, which means that you and us and everybody around you as a young person, as a child moving into adulthood, you should already be concerned with developing yourself, who you are as an individual person. And it's the best time in your life to start establishing that you want to be a person that's whole, that develops, that continues to learn, and to focuses on ultimately providing benefit to yourself and to society. And other people will drastically get in the way of that and hinder that with some of their ideas. And then if you're in that position, then that's going to put a great burden on you, or others, if you observe this in other people, that has to now become part of who you are, in terms of how do you take that situation that's now part of your life and use it as understanding, but not as regret, not as, oh, if this had changed or hadn't have been this way in my life would be so much better, and this and that and the other. That's not the way that works. Christ, and again, part of forgiveness is that you're supposed to be grateful for your life as well, however it's unfolding, and then take these things that happen in your life and use them as building blocks. That's the proper thing to do with them. It's not to look at them as a regret or as a wishful thinking that, oh, if this had just been different, that's not your life. That's an imaginary or fiction. You don't want to develop that. You want to be able to make everything as part of the chapters of your life so that you build on them positively. And the message of Christ and what this day of Easter represents has a lot to do with how you take that path and take your life path the right way, to be able to forgive, to accept, and to grow. That's a lot of what salvation is. Really, it's that really kind of like that, but accept and grow. So accept and forgive and grow. Accept, forgive, and grow, which also is very much tied to love and grow and being grateful and having gratitude for this experience called life. So it's a wonderful, beautiful day, and it happens at the right time of year with spring. Christ was he rose from the dead. His message rose from the dead. His message is still with us today. All of that. Information is a concept that we struggle with. We haven't really defined what information is. Christ left information for us, and it lives today. That is him. That is representative of his life, is the deeds that he did and the information that he left behind. All of the apostles except one were also martyrs. This is extremely significant, and it also should be part of what was remembered in Easter, that many people, not just Christ, died for this message. It was like 17 of them or something, I think. The apostles all died, were killed, martyred. Martyr means they were killed. They didn't just die. I mean, all of them died except for Christ. Christ was the only one that went to heaven and rose from the dead. But they live in eternity. Their spirit lives. They're through Christ, and however you want to think about the afterlife and heaven and all of that. It's really, as living human beings, important to remember that those people were, just like Christ, were all killed, murdered by other humans who couldn't. Their message was so powerful against the evil. Christ was a message against evil, and all of the apostles were carrying that message along, and they tried. The evil in society tried, and they're still trying today, to stop that message. It hurts evil. Evil doesn't want that light shined on it. And it's so important. There is not many things in which such a high percentage of the people carrying a message were killed. I mean, even in the American Revolution, many of them were killed or imprisoned, but not at the degree as a percentage of the number of them. Almost all of them, 90+% of them were killed for this message, but it was such a powerful message that they couldn't kill the message. It lives today. That is something that should just resonate with anybody, whether you're a Christian or not. There was a message so powerful that killing almost every person who carried the message couldn't kill the message. The message just got stronger and stronger and stronger. And it tells you something about what humanity wants. Humanity really wants to live peacefully together. Humanity wants forgiveness. Otherwise, that message would not have lasted. It wouldn't have, and people wouldn't have stood up for it. And so many people have died for it. If it wasn't a message that wasn't just some little group of people who had a message, and this is the message of God. That message, people want that message because it's the right message. We know inherently in us that is the message that helps all of us get along with one another. We want peace, and we don't want to serve. All men are flawed, and we don't want to serve a man. We want to serve God. We want to serve the highest and the greatest ideals of what the life can be. Anyhow, this is very long. I love you, and I hope some of that makes sense. I can't put it all into words. I don't understand it all. I don't even pretend to understand it all. But that's the message. That's my feelings. So it's a beautiful and wonderful, wonderful day. Remember, it's between you and God. It's not between, other people are a part of it, of course, but it starts with you and God. If you feel that you need to remove yourself from other things, despite what other people try to make you feel, that's okay. It's as long as you're in communication with God, let that guide you. And the younger you are, now it doesn't mean that when you get old, if you messed up, that you can't always come back to God and the right teachings. That's not what I'm saying. You can always do that. Many people go through a lot before they come back around to that message and accepting it. But you know that at a young age, you can learn anything at a young age and become very good at whatever it is that you want to put your mind to. You're not too young to start setting your compass, and you can grow and change. You can develop new understandings of things. Like keep evolving and observing, and how, but it doesn't mean that you have to understand everything when you first start off. It doesn't mean that you won't continue to learn and evolve as you go through your entire life. But you can start setting that compass as early as you want. And that early age when your brain is still developing, is still growing, and it's a great time to start thinking for yourself and creating the person that you want to be. And making the philosophy, the teachings of Christ, part of that is important. And remember, the Bible, although it's the Holy Bible, it's the gospel, it's still just a part of everything. The words, they've been written and interpreted by men, and don't let anybody ever tell you that that's where everything begins and ends. That's another problem. Your relationship with Christ and God it's a spiritual thing. It's energy. It's the different terms have been used for it. Life force, or the universal force, or the Holy Spirit. These things don't come from a book. These are things you got to develop within yourself, and they're different for everybody because everybody's life is different. So your life path and the things around you are going to give you a different relationship as the individual relationship with God. But as a whole, all the combination of all those individual relationships make us a whole. And the more that each individual human being has created a relationship with God, the stronger we are as a whole, the more godly we are as a whole. So we're the sum of all of that, and that's part of why we don't need to force our beliefs on other people, because it's a little, because they're developing in their own way. But it's important to acknowledge Christ died, the apostles died for this message because they had to spread it. They had to talk about it. So you have to be willing to let other people be aware of it, but you do it in your own way, because that takes every person's more receiving of different ideas in different ways. So there's not just one way to spread the message of Christ or the Gospels. There's many different ways to do that, and we need everybody kind of understanding that where one person feels comfortable hearing it from somebody in a certain way, or finding out about it in a certain way, another person may be receptive to it from another way. So there's not just one way to go about it. In fact, it would be counterproductive to think that there's just one way to go about it and spreading that message. I love you. Happy Easter.